No one wanted the sick bull, discarded at the auction like a worthless burden. But Anthony, a rancher marked by loss, felt something different when he looked into the animal's eyes. What he didn't imagine was that the bull harbored a secret capable of shaking an entire lineage. And that's how an unlikely bid revealed the truth behind a divided family and a forgotten past. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The sun was setting on the horizon of the small town of Roseville, tinting the sky with orange hues as the last participants of the rural auction began to disperse. Anthony Cooper, a 50-year-old man with deep wrinkles and hands calloused from working in the fields, was about to leave when the auctioneer announced the day's final lot. And to finish, we have here an unregistered bull. As you can see, it's not in the best condition, said the auctioneer without enthusiasm, as two ranch hands struggled to bring in a skeletal animal with patchy fur and dull eyes. Mocking laughter echoed through the place. "That one's not even good for slaughter," someone shouted. Another added, "You'll have to pay someone to take that wretch away." Anthony, who was there only at the invitation of a rancher friend, felt something strange when looking at the animal. A distant memory, an almost forgotten pain. His eyes, deep brown, fixed on those of the bull. $80, he said, surprising himself with the bid. Silence took over the environment, followed by more contained laughter. $80. For the gentleman in the grey hat. Anyone give more? The auctioneer looked around, but no one spoke up. Sold for $80. His friend, Charles Mendoza, looked at him in disbelief. Lost your mind, Anthony? What are you going to do with that animal? I can't explain, Anthony replied, his eyes still fixed on the bull. Something tells me I need to do this. On the way back to Hope Ranch, Anthony's property, the bull almost collapsed twice in the truck. Charles, who had offered a ride, shook his head in disapproval. You threw your money away, my friend. This beast won't make it through the night. Anthony remained silent, his thoughts drifting to years ago, when doctors had said the same words about his daughter Louise. There's no hope, they said, and he had believed them, a mistake he would never forgive himself for. When they arrived at the ranch, Anthony called his foreman, Jim, a trusted man who had worked with him for over 20 years. I want you to prepare the isolated paddock with fresh water and the best grass. We'll put this bull there. Jim's eyes widened. Boss, with all due respect, this animal is closer to the other world than this one. It's not worth the effort. I'm not asking for your opinion, Jim. I'm giving you an order, Anthony responded with unusual firmness. While the ranch hands unloaded the animal with difficulty, Helen, the house's housekeeper and old family friend, watched from the porch. Seeing the condition of the bull, she approached Anthony. It's because of Louise, isn't it? She asked quietly. Anthony merely nodded with teary eyes. Maybe this time I can do things differently. That night, against all recommendations, Anthony remained beside the animal. He applied the medications that the reluctant veterinarian had left, cleaned the wounds with warm water and ash soap, following old recipes his grandmother had taught him. Come on, partner, he whispered to the bull. Don't give up yet. Tomorrow is a new day. In another part of the ranch, Jim was talking with other workers during dinner. The boss has finally lost his mind, he commented, serving himself more beans, wasting time and money on a condemned animal. It's been like this since the girl passed, observed one of the older workers. He's never been the same. What none of them knew was that the bull, seemingly worthless, harbored a secret that would transform not only the fate of Hope Ranch, but the entire surrounding community. Morning. Arrived at Hope Ranch with a golden glow. Anthony awoke with a start in the improvised chair next to the paddock where he had left the bull. His body ached from the discomfort of a poorly slept night, but his biggest concern was different. He rose quickly, fearing the worst. To his surprise, the animal was standing, trembling, true but alive, and trying to chew some blades of grass. A subtle smile formed on Anthony's tired face. Stubborn like me, he murmured, approaching slowly so as not to startle the animal. Helen appeared carrying a thermos of coffee and homemade bread, her brown eyes framed by grey strands that escaped. From her bun widened at seeing the bull standing. "I don't believe it," she said, placing the tray on a wooden stump. "This animal is stronger than it looks." "Or more stubborn," Anthony replied, accepting the cup of coffee Helen offered him. "I called Dr. Paul to come examine him today." Helen hesitated before speaking. "I received a call from Hannah Louise last night." Anthony's face hardened at hearing his daughter's name. "And what did she want?" "She said she's coming back to the United States. She finished her master's in Lisbon and wants to spend some time here before deciding her next step." Anthony took a sip of coffee, avoiding Helen's gaze. The relationship with his older daughter had deteriorated after the tragedy with Louise. Anna blamed her father for not seeking more advanced treatments abroad, while he carried his own guilt. In silence. "When does she arrive?" he finally asked. "Next week." She asked if she could stay at the ranch. Before Anthony could respond, Jim appeared accompanied by Dr. Paul Mendez, the region's veterinarian. The doctor, a middle-aged man with thin-framed glasses and a well-trimmed beard, looked surprised at the bull. "So the old stubborn one is still standing?" "I confess I didn't expect that," he commented, approaching to examine the animal. After thorough analysis, the veterinarian adjusted his glasses and turned to Anthony. "It's impressive, he's still very weak, but his vital signs are more stable than I imagined. I'll leave more antibiotics and a special nutritional supplement." "Will he recover?" Anthony asked with contained hope in his voice. "It's too early to guarantee, but he's past the worst phase. If he continues like this, he has good chances," the veterinarian responded, storing his instruments. Then he noticed something on the animal's left flank. "What's this here?" Dr. Paul cleaned an area where the fur was thinner, revealing an almost faded circular mark. "Looks like an old identification tattoo. I'll take a photo and check the database." Meanwhile, at the ranch house, the phone rang. Helen answered, and after a brief conversation, went to find Anthony in the field. "It was Ryan Adams, that reporter from the agricultural magazine," she informed him. "He said he heard about the bull you bought at the auction and wants to do a story on animal recovery." "How did he find out about this?" Anthony asked, suspicious. "Probably someone from the auction commented. You know how quickly news travels in this region." That same day, at dusk, Anthony observed the bull with renewed attention. The animal seemed a little stronger, its eyes gaining a shine that wasn't there before. For a moment, Anthony saw in it the reflection of his own story, a survivor against all odds. "I'm going to call you Hope," he decided, speaking aloud, "because that's what you've brought back to me." In the employee's house, Jim was talking with Martha, his wife, as they had dinner. "The boss is obsessed with this bull. He spends more time with it than on ranch administration," he commented, concerned. "Maybe it's the way he found to deal with the pain," Martha replied, serving more rice. "Since we lost young Louise, he's shut himself off from the world. And now Anna Louise is coming back," Jim added. "That's going to stir up old wounds." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "This ranch holds many unresolved stories, and something tells me this bull will bring to light secrets that were well buried." What none of them imagined was that the photograph sent by Dr. Paul to the National Genetic Database would trigger a series of events that would forever change the destiny of everyone at Hope Ranch. 3 days passed with a routine that surprised everyone at Hope Ranch. Anthony, always known for his dedication to administrative work, now divided his time between the office desk and the paddock where the bull Hope visibly recovered. News of the animal's survival began to circulate through the region, initially as a joke, then as a curiosity. On Wednesday morning, an unknown car crossed the ranch gates. From it descended a tall man, approximately 60 years old, wearing an elegant suit despite the heat of the California countryside. His blue eyes carefully examined every detail of the property. Helen was the first to spot him from the kitchen window. "Who could that be?" she murmured to herself, drying her hands on her apron and going to the porch. "Good morning, ma'am," the man greeted with a subtly foreign accent. "I'm looking for the owner, Anthony Cooper." "And who shall I announce?" Helen asked, suspicious. "Bernard Montgomery," from the American Association of Animal Genetic Preservation. Helen led him to the living room and went to fetch Anthony, who was with the veterinarian at the bull's paddock. When she returned accompanied by her boss, she found the visitor attentively observing an old photograph on the wall, a younger Anthony beside a smiling girl of approximately 10 years. "Mr. Cooper, it's a pleasure to meet you," said Bernard, extending his hand. "I came personally after receiving Dr. Paul's report about the animal you recently acquired." Anthony frowned. "And what does your association have to do with my bull?" Bernard smiled, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. "Everything, actually. The tattoo identified on the animal corresponds to a 2005 registry of a purebred specimen of the Caldiano Caracu breed, an extremely rare variation and considered practically extinct after the closure of the Montgomery breeding farm in Virginia." "Montgomery?" Helen interrupted. "Like you, sir." "Exactly. The breeding farm belonged to my family for 3 generations. Unfortunately, after a series of financial problems and my father's illness, we had to cease operations. During the judicial dissolution, many animals disappeared." Dr. Paul, who was accompanying Anthony, intervened. "That's why the system alerted our association. This bull may be one of the last pure specimens of this lineage." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car braking abruptly in front of the house. Through the window, Anthony saw a taxi from which descended a young woman with brown hair and dark glasses. His heart raced as he recognized his daughter, Anna Louise, a week earlier than expected. "Dad," she said dryly upon entering, dragging a wheeled suitcase. Her eyes, identical to Anthony's, quickly scanned those present in the room before landing. On the photograph Bernard had been observing earlier, her expression hardened. "Anna," exclaimed Helen, hugging her, "we weren't expecting you so soon." "I managed to advance some commitments," the young woman replied, returning the housekeeper's hug while maintaining distance from her father. "I didn't want to announce it to avoid being a bother." The tense atmosphere was broken by Jim, who entered hurriedly. "Boss, sorry to interrupt, but the bull knocked down the paddock fence and is loose in the main pasture." Everyone followed Anthony outside. On the way to the pasture, Bernard questioned, "Is he aggressive?" "On the contrary," the veterinarian replied. "He's surprisingly docile for an adult bull, but he's still weak and could hurt himself." When they reached the pasture, they found the animal peacefully grazing among the common cattle. Upon seeing Anthony, he raised his head and walked slowly in his direction, to everyone's astonishment. "Extraordinary," Bernard murmured. "He recognizes you." Anna Louise observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "What's this? Story about a rare bull, Dad? Another one of your projects to occupy your time?" Before Anthony could respond, Bernard approached Anna. "You must be Mr. Cooper's daughter. I'm Bernard Montgomery, and I came to verify an animal potentially valuable for national genetic preservation." "Geneticist?" Anna asked, suddenly interested. "I did my master's in biotechnology in Lisbon." While the two conversed, Anthony approached the bull, caressing its neck with familiarity. The expression on his face revealed a peace he hadn't experienced in years. "What you don't know, Bernard," Dr. Paul commented quietly, "is that this animal and Anthony share more than they appear to. Both survived when no one would bet on them." Helen, hearing the comment, added, "And both carry secrets that this ranch has long hidden." Dinner at Hope Ranch that night was marked by an uncomfortable silence. At the head of the massive wooden table, Anthony methodically cut his steak while avoiding his daughter's interrogative gaze. Anna Louise, seated to his right, picked at her food without much interest, occasionally glancing at Bernard Montgomery, the unexpected guest who had accepted the invitation to spend the night at the ranch. "So, Mr. Montgomery," Anna began, breaking the silence, "you mentioned that many animals disappeared during the dissolution of your family's breeding farm. How exactly did that happen?" Bernard set down his fork and wiped his lips with the napkin before responding. "It was a turbulent period. My father fell gravely ill, and the administration fell into the hands of a cousin who, let's say, didn't have the same scruples. When we finally took control, many animals of high genetic value had been sold irregularly." And my father's bull is one of them? All indications point to yes. The identification tattoo corresponds to a specimen born on our property in 2005. Helen, who was serving more rice, interrupted, "But that was almost 20 years ago. How did he end up in that rural auction?" "That's exactly what I intend to investigate," Bernard replied. "But one thing is certain. He was mistreated and neglected for a long time." Anna turned to her father. "And why did you, of all people, decide to save precisely this animal?" Anthony finally met his daughter's gaze. "I didn't know any of this when I bought him. Hannah, it was instinct." "Instinct?" Anna gave a dry laugh. "Like the instinct that made you give up on Louise when the doctors said there was no hope." The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. Helen let out a sigh of anguish. "Anna." "Louise," she intervened, "this isn't the time." "And when will be the time, Helen?" Anna stood up, throwing her napkin on the plate. 5 years have passed, and no one in this house has the courage to talk about what happened. Anthony also stood, his face pale. "I never gave up on your sister." "No?" Anna confronted her father, her eyes watering. "Then why did you refuse the experimental treatment in the United States? Why did you accept it when the doctors said there was nothing more to be done?" Bernard, visibly uncomfortable, made a motion to stand, but Anthony gestured for him to remain seated. "You don't know everything, Anna," he said with a trembling voice. "There are things you never knew. Then tell me, what could justify letting my sister go without trying everything?" Helen approached Anna, trying to calm her, but the young woman stepped away. Anthony, after a moment of hesitation, walked to an old writing desk in the corner of the room and removed a yellowed envelope from a drawer. "I tried," he said, handing the envelope to his daughter. "But not in the way you think." Anna opened the envelope with trembling hands and began to read the contents. Her face changed expression as she absorbed the information. "What is this?" she finally asked, raising her eyes to her father. "Louise had a rare genetic condition. The treatment in the United States was experimental and dangerous. The doctors explained to me that the chances of success were minimal and the suffering would be immense." Anthony paused, his voice choked. "Your sister was only 15, but it was she who decided. She didn't want to spend her last days in painful experiments far from home." Anna sank back into the chair, rereading the documents. "Why did you never tell me this? You were in college, focused on the medical school entrance exam. Louise made me promise not to tell you until everything was over. She didn't want you to abandon your dreams to stay with her." The silence that followed was different from the previous one, no longer charged with accusations, but with painful revelations being processed. Bernard, who observed the scene in respectful silence, finally spoke. "Mr. Cooper, Anna Louise, I apologize for witnessing such an intimate moment. Perhaps it would be better for me to withdraw." "No," Anthony interrupted. "You came here for an important reason, and perhaps it's not a coincidence that all this is happening now." Helen, who had discreetly left during the discussion, returned to the room holding a small photo album. "I think it's time for both of you to see this," she said, placing the album on the table. On the first page, an old photograph showed a young Anthony beside an elegant woman in front of a ranch that wasn't Hope Ranch. "Who is she?" asked Anna. "Clara Montgomery," Helen replied, looking significantly at Bernard. "Your mother, and Mr. Bernard's sister." The silence that settled in the dining room was as dense as the clouds announcing a storm outside. Anna Louise stared fixedly at the photograph, trying to find in her own features some resemblance to the elegant woman beside her father. Bernard, meanwhile, had visibly paled. "Clara," he murmured, extending his hand to touch the image. "My younger sister." Anthony observed the scene with a mixture of relief and apprehension. A secret kept for decades was finally coming to light, like dammed waters finding a crack in the barrier. "You knew each other?" asked Anna, alternating her gaze between her father and Bernard. "More than that," Anthony replied, sitting heavily. "Bernard is your uncle." Helen, who remained standing, placed her hand on Anna's shoulder. "Your mother didn't die in an accident." As we always told you, dear, Clara left the ranch when you were only 2 years old. Why? Anna's question came almost as a whisper. Bernard took a deep breath before speaking. My sister suffered from bipolar disorder. At the time, treatment wasn't as advanced as it is today. She had severe episodes, followed by long periods of depression. Clara loved you and Louise more than anything, continued Anthony, his voice choked with emotion. But after Louise's birth, her condition worsened dramatically. She feared hurting you during an episode. Anna rose abruptly, knocking over the chair. And you simply let her go? You told your daughters that she was dead? It was she who asked. Anna, Helen intervened. Clara believed it would be easier for you to grow up thinking she had passed away than knowing she was alive but incapable of being a mother. And where did she go? Asked Anna, tears freely, streaming down her face. Bernard swallowed hard. Back to the family breeding farm in Virginia. It was when my father was still alive. He took her in, kept her protected. Clara found peace caring for the animals, especially the newborn calves. And the bull, murmured Anthony, a sudden realization illuminating his gaze. The bull, Hope. He was one of the animals that Clara raised? Bernard slowly nodded. It's possible. By the age and registry, he would have been born precisely during the period when Clara was working in the farm's breeding sector. Thunder echoed in the distance, and the rain began to fall, first slowly, then with increasing intensity, as if the sky accompanied the emotions overflowing in that room. All these years, Anna shook her head incredulous. And you never told me, Dad, never. I wrote to you several times after you went to Lisbon, Anthony replied, but the letters came back unanswered. Because I didn't want to hear from you, I thought you had given up on Louise, that you hadn't fought for her like I didn't fight for your mother, Anthony completed. Is that what you thought? All these years? Anna didn't respond, but her silence was eloquent. Bernard was leafing through the photo album, stopping at a specific image. Clara, with baby Anna in her arms and an already visible pregnancy belly. Louise, he murmured. Louise's genetic condition. It was hereditary, wasn't it? Anthony nodded. The doctors discovered it when she was 12. A rare mutation in the same gene that caused Clara's disorder, but manifested differently. When Clara found out, she blamed herself even more for having left. You kept in touch? Asked Anna, surprised. I sent news of the girls regularly, Helen replied. Your father respected Clara's decision, but never stopped loving her or worrying about her. The storm now fell with full force on the ranch. Lightning briefly illuminated the room through the windows, revealing Jim's face at the door. Boss, he called, hesitant to interrupt. The bull is restless with the storm. I've never seen him like this. He's trying to knock down the fence again. Anthony rose immediately. I need to go there. I'll go with you, declared Bernard, closing the photo album. Anna, still processing the revelations, surprised everyone. I'm going too. The three went out under the torrential rain, illuminating the path with flashlights. When they reached the paddock, they found the bull Hope walking in circles, clearly agitated. He seems scared, observed Anna. Bernard approached the fence. It's more than that. He's trying to protect something. A new lightning bolt revealed in the most distant corner of the paddock a huddled figure under a tree, a woman with graying hair, soaked by the rain, hugging her own knees. My God, whispered Anthony, recognizing her immediately despite the years. Clara? The rain fell mercilessly on Hope Ranch, turning the ground to mud and making each step Anthony took toward the huddled figure under the tree difficult. His heart beat so strongly it seemed to want to escape from his chest. 20 years had passed since the last time he saw Clara, but he would recognize her silhouette anywhere under any circumstances. Careful, warned Bernard, holding Anthony's arm. The bull is agitated. Indeed, Hope was moving between them and Clara, as if protecting her. His eyes, previously opaque, now shone with an almost wild intensity. Anna Louise, paralyzed by the scene unfolding before her, couldn't take her eyes off that woman, her mother, who throughout her life she had believed was in a grave she religiously visited on each birthday. Mom, The word escaped her lips like a hesitant prayer. Clara slowly raised her face upon hearing the voice. Her hair, once brown like Anna's, was now completely grey. Wrinkles deeply marked her face, but her eyes, those same eyes that Anna saw in the mirror every day, remained vivid and intense. "Anthony," Clara called with a trembling voice. "Forgive me. I shouldn't have come." Anthony carefully skirted the bull, which surprisingly moved away, allowing his passage. He knelt in the mud before Clara, protecting her from the rain with his own body. "All these years," he murmured, touching her face with trembling hands. "All these years wondering where you might be, if you were well." Clara averted her gaze, unable to sustain Anthony's. "When I found out about Louise and about what happened, I couldn't stay away anymore. I needed to see Anna, see you." "How did you get here?" asked Bernard, cautiously approaching. "I followed the news about the bull," Clara replied. "I saw the photo of the ranch in the online report. I recognized it immediately." She paused, trying to control her emotion. "I couldn't believe it was really him, Prince. That's what we called him at the breeding farm. He was the last calf I helped birth before my last episode." Meanwhile, Anna remained motionless, as if her feet had taken root in the muddy ground. Her entire life had been built on a lie told out of love, perhaps, but still a lie. Her mother hadn't been taken by an accident. She had chosen to leave. "You abandoned me," she finally said, her voice almost inaudible under the sound of the rain. Clara stood up with difficulty, leaning on the tree trunk. "Anna, my Anna, you've grown so much." "Don't call me that," Anna replied, taking a step back. "You lost that right when you decided we were better off without you." "Anna," Anthony intervened, "your mother was ill. She did what she believed was best for you." "Best?" Anna laughed bitterly. "Growing up believing my mother had died? Blaming my father for not fighting for my sister when in reality it was you who had abandoned us first?" Tears mixed with the rain on her face. "And now you appear like this out of nowhere because you saw a news report about a bull?" The animal, as if understanding it was being mentioned, slowly approached Clara, lowering its head so she could touch it. The gesture, of surprising gentleness for such a large animal, contrasted with the emotional storm unfolding among the humans. "It wasn't just because of the bull," Clara replied, her voice gaining firmness. "I came because I found out about Louise, because I couldn't be present when she needed me most, because I carry this guilt every day, the guilt of having passed on to my daughter a condition that took her away so early." "It wasn't your fault," said Bernard, approaching his sister. "No one could have predicted this." "How did you find out about Louise?" asked Anthony, confused. "Helen never stopped writing to me," Clara replied. "All these years, she was my only link to you." Anna looked at the main house where Helen's silhouette could be seen on the porch, observing the scene from a distance. So many secrets, so many truths hidden behind the silence of the ranch. "Why now?" asked Anna, taking a hesitant step toward her mother. "Why not when Louise was—" "I tried," Clara interrupted, tears freely flowing. "I even came here, but stayed, at the town hotel. The fear was greater, fear that my presence would only make everything worse, fear that you would hate me, fear of seeing in Louise's eyes the reflection of my weakness." The rain was beginning to diminish, as if the sky had shed all the tears it held. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle sound of the bull breathing heavily beside Clara. "I think we need to get everyone inside," suggested Bernard, practical. "Clara needs dry clothes and a warm place." Anthony nodded, extending his hand to Clara. After a moment of hesitation, she accepted it. The bull watched every movement, as if assessing Anthony's intentions. "And what about him?" asked Anthony, indicating the animal with a gesture. "Prince was always special," Clara replied with a small smile. "It seems he still remembers me, after all these years." Anna, soaked and emotionally exhausted, finally approached. Without saying a word, she took off her own jacket and placed it over her mother's shoulders. The gesture, simple but loaded with meaning, said more than any words could express at that moment. As they walked toward the house, no one noticed the dark car that had discreetly parked near the ranch entrance. nor the solitary figure who observed the entire scene through binoculars, recording every detail on a small recorder. The next morning dawned with the air cleaned by the previous night's rain, but the atmosphere inside the main house of Hope Ranch remained as dense as fog. Clara, wearing clothes borrowed from Helen, sat at the kitchen table, holding a cup of tea with slightly trembling hands. The silence was broken only by the tick-tock of the antique clock on the wall and the occasional song of a bird coming from the open window. Helen moved efficiently between the stove and the sink, preparing breakfast while casting concerned glances at her former boss and friend. 20 years had passed, but the complicity between them remained intact, as if time were merely an insignificant detail. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" Clara suddenly asked, her voice low and insecure. Helen paused what she was doing and turned to face Clara. "Anna Louise has the same temperament as you, stubborn, proud, but with an enormous heart. Give her time." At that moment, Anthony entered the kitchen, his hair still damp from the morning shower. Upon seeing Clara, he briefly hesitated before sitting at the table across from her. "Did you manage to sleep?" he asked, accepting the cup of coffee Helen offered him. Clara nodded slightly. "The room is exactly as I left it. Even the curtains are the same. I never had the courage to change anything," Anthony confessed. "I always held on to the hope that one day you would return." The moment was interrupted by Bernard's arrival, who entered accompanied by Jim. The concerned expression of both immediately alerted Anthony. "What happened?" he asked, standing up. "We found this nailed to the main gate," Jim replied, extending an official envelope. Anthony opened the envelope and quickly read the contents, his face hardening with each line. "A judicial notification. The National Association of Animal Genetic Preservation is claiming ownership of the bull Hope, alleging public interest in preserving rare genetic heritage." Bernard frowned, confused. "But that doesn't make sense. I represent the association and didn't authorize any legal action." "It's not your association," Anthony clarified, passing the document to Bernard. "It's a different entity, presided over by a certain Richard Vance." Clara visibly paled at hearing the name. "Richard, it can't be. You know him?" Anthony asked. "Richard was the cousin who took control of the breeding farm when my father fell ill," explained Bernard, before Clara could respond. "He was the one who conducted the business dissolution process in a questionable manner. And he was behind my last hospitalization," added Clara, her voice trembling. "He took advantage of a moment of fragility to convince me that I was a danger to my own family. That's why I agreed to distance myself definitively." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Helen, who had stopped moving to listen to the conversation, was the first to break it. "That dark car that has been passing by the ranch road in recent days. It must be him watching us." Jim nodded. "And that's not all. I was talking with the ranch hands this morning. Someone cut part of the back fence during the night. If it weren't for the rain, the bull could have escaped." Anna Louise entered the kitchen at that moment, catching the end of the conversation. Despite the poorly slept night, her posture was firm, and her eyes determined. "We need a lawyer," she declared, surprising everyone with her intervention. "If this Richard thinks he can simply arrive and take what is ours, he's very mistaken." "Ours?" repeated Anthony, raising an eyebrow. Anna maintained her father's gaze. "Yes, ours. This is still my home, as much as I've tried to run from it. And that bull—" She briefly hesitated before continuing. "That bull seems to be the only link that managed to reunite this family again." Clara looked at her daughter with teary eyes, but contained herself from showing too much emotion. Anna still kept her distance, and it was necessary to respect her time. Bernard, who was analyzing the document attentively, raised his head. "There's something strange here. The petition mentions privileged information about the real genetic value of the specimen. How could he know about the bull's rarity so quickly?" "Because someone told him," concluded Anthony. "The question is, who?" Everyone in the kitchen exchanged suspicious glances. The circle of people who knew the bull's true identity was restricted, but information had ways of leaking, especially in a small community. "The veterinarian," suggested Jim. "He was the one who sent the photos to the database." Dr. Paul has been a family friend for years, defended Helen. He would never betray us like that. Perhaps not intentionally, pondered Bernard. The genetic registry systems are accessible to various credentialed professionals. Richard has contacts throughout the sector. The discussion was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching. Jim ran to the window. It's the local newspaper's car, he informed. That reporter, Ryan Adams, is back, and there are more people with him. Journalists? Asked Anthony, concerned. No, Jim replied, narrowing his eyes to see better. Looks like a film crew, and there's a man in a suit I don't know. Everyone headed to the porch, where they could see the car parking and 4 people disembarking. Ryan Adams, 2 men with filming equipment, and a middle-aged man elegantly dressed in an impeccable grey suit. Clara grabbed Bernard's arm tightly. "It's him," she whispered. "Richard." Richard Vance walked confidently toward the house, as if he were already its owner. His calculated smile didn't reach the cold eyes that examined every detail of the property. "Anthony Cooper," he called loudly upon spotting the group on the porch. "I've come to personally meet the famous bull that's causing such a stir, and from what I see," he added, fixing his gaze on Clara, "I found much more than I expected." The tension in the air was almost palpable as Richard Vance climbed the porch steps with the ease of someone who doesn't fear confrontations. His calculating eyes passed over each face present, lingering especially on Clara, a malicious smile forming on his thin lips. "Clara Montgomery," he said, pronouncing each syllable as if savoring an expensive wine. "After so long, you finally emerged from the shadows. What a touching family reunion." Anthony stepped forward, positioning himself protectively between Richard and his family. "What exactly do you want, Vance? This is private property." "Just exercising my right as president of the National Association of Animal Genetic Preservation," Richard replied, gesturing to reporter Ryan, who was already positioning his recorder. "I've come to ensure that a national genetic heritage is properly preserved in an appropriate institution, not hidden away in a decaying ranch." Anna Louise, who was observing the scene with growing indignation, stepped forward. "Decaying? This decaying ranch saved that bull when he was on the brink of giving up and no one else cared. Where was your concern for genetic heritage when the animal was being mistreated and neglected?" Richard turned his attention to Anna, assessing her with curiosity. "You must be the eldest daughter. Interesting how the Montgomery genes are strong. You're the image of your mother in her youth." His tone was falsely cordial. "And as for the bull, my dear, I couldn't protect what I didn't know existed. Now that I know, I'm simply fulfilling my duty." "Your duty?" Bernard intervened, advancing to stand beside Anthony. "As if you cared about anything beyond money and power. You destroyed our family's legacy once, Richard. We won't allow you to do it again." Jim, who had discreetly disappeared during the confrontation, returned hurriedly. "Boss," he called in a low voice, "there are more people arriving, many people." Indeed, a small procession of cars and even some tractors was approaching via the ranch road. They were residents of the region, led by veterinarian Dr. Paul and by Martha, Jim's wife. "What does this mean?" asked Richard, visibly irritated by the interruption. Dr. Paul, a normally calm and reserved man, climbed the porch steps with determination. "It means, Mr. Vance, that this community won't allow you to take the bull hope." Martha, a robust woman with hands calloused from work, complimented, "Since the story of the bull spread, he's become a symbol for all of us, a story of resistance, of not giving up even when everything seems lost." From the group forming in the ranch yard, a young teacher from the local school stepped forward. "Our children visited the Bull Hope last week. They wrote essays about overcoming and second chances. This animal is teaching values that no book could." Richard looked around, realizing that the situation was slipping from his control. The film crew he had brought was now recording not his planned victory, but a spontaneous community movement against his pretensions. "This is irrelevant," he declared, trying to maintain his composure. "I have a court order that will be enforced, regardless of this rural theater." At that moment, an elderly lady made her way through the crowd. Leaning on a cane, she advanced with dignity until she stood face to face with Richard. "Do you remember me, Richard Vance?" she asked, her voice frail but firm. Richard's confident countenance faltered for an instant. "Ms. Eliza, my uncle's secretary. The secretary who documented each of your frauds during the dissolution of the breeding farm," she confirmed, raising an old folder she carried with her. "Documents I've kept all these years, waiting for the right moment to use them." Clara, who until then had been observing the scene paralyzed by old painful memories, found the strength to approach. "You manipulated my condition to separate me from my family, Richard. You convinced the doctors that I was a danger, altered my medications, also I would disappear and you could take total control of the breeding farm." "Absurd," Richard retorted, but his tone no longer carried the same confidence. "You were ill, Clara, delusional. No one will believe your accusations." "Perhaps not hers in isolation," Bernard intervened, "but with Ms. Eliza's documents plus the medical records I've managed to recover and the testimony of former breeding farm employees we've been gathering for years, it's a different story." Reporter. Ryan, who until then had been silently recording everything, approached with renewed interest. "Mr. Vance, would you care to comment on these accusations for our report?" Richard took a step back, his carefully orchestrated plan crumbling before his eyes. "This is an ambush," he muttered, looking accusingly at Clara. "You planned all this?" "No." "Richard," she replied with serenity, "I merely followed my heart back home to my family. The rest was a consequence of your own actions." Anna Louise, observing her mother confront her former tormentor, felt something change within her. A wall of resentment beginning to crumble. Impulsively, she approached Clara and held her hand, silently conveying her support. As if sensing the change in atmosphere, a powerful moo echoed from the nearby pasture. All eyes turned to the imposing Bull Hope, who was observing the scene from the fence, as if understanding that his fate was being decided. "Look," said Dr. Paul, pointing to the animal. "Who would have thought that nearly lifeless creature Anthony brought from the auction would transform into this? This is the true value of Hope Ranch, not just saving lives but restoring dignity." Richard, realizing he had lost the battle at that moment, retreated toward his car, followed by his confused assistants. "This isn't over," he threatened, his voice betraying frustration. "I still have the court order, which will be contested with all these new elements," Anthony calmly replied. "And meanwhile, the Bull Hope will remain exactly where he is, at home." The crowd applauded, transforming what had begun as a confrontation into an impromptu celebration. Helen, always practical, was already organizing the young people to bring more chairs and prepare coffee for everyone. Amid the commotion, Anthony found a moment to approach Anna and Clara, who remained holding hands, a simple but deeply significant gesture. "It seems our family, like the bull, has been given a second chance," he commented, the emotion evident in his voice. Clara looked at her daughter, cautious. "Anna, I know we still have much to talk about, much to rebuild." "Yes," interrupted Anna, her eyes revealing the complexity of her feelings. "We have a long road ahead of us. But today I realize something important. Harboring resentments is like carrying a weight that doesn't belong to us. I'm ready to start letting it go." The Bull Hope, as if understanding the moment of reconciliation, approached the fence where the family was gathered. Clara extended her hand, caressing the muzzle of the animal that, in some mysterious way, had been the catalyst that brought to light truths long buried. "Sometimes," she said, looking alternately at the bull and at her reunited family, "we need to lose almost everything to discover what truly matters." As the sun began to set on the horizon of Hope Ranch, painting the sky with orange hues, a new story was beginning to be written, not just for the bull that had defied all expectations, but for a family that, like him, had found the strength to rise again when everything seemed lost. Hope, after all, wasn't just the name of a bull or a ranch. It was the invisible thread that had kept those lives connected through the years, distances, and pains. A thread that finally